It is a wonderful pleasure to welcome Celeste Marcus for the fourth time, actually, on this podcast. I think those who are familiar
Pleasure.
with the show should know that she is the managing editor of Liberties Journal. Welcome once again, Celeste. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Pleasure.
So the topic of this hour is your latest essay for the journal. Is entitled After Rape, a Guide for the Tormented. Um, I consider myself quite well versed in the Celeste Marcus over. I've read a few like really tough reads from you thus far, but I think this one might be the toughest. So I think it's no delaying it, I suppose. So
Right.
tell me about the how you decided to put this essay into paper.
Yeah. It was definitely a very different writing process for me than anything else I've written. Um, I write a bit about this in the essay itself. I I struck up a friendship with a woman who had just been raped, and it kind of happened um, in this very strange way, but we became very, very close. I mean, this is a woman I've never met in person. It was a kind of weird scientific experiment, like the way that we came together, really in this very intense vacuum. Um, and from the start, it was we met online. She was trying to find somebody else who had been raped by the same man that had raped her, and I had not been, but she had been doing. I used to be, like, many, many years ago, friends with this man, and then I've since stopped being friends with him, not because he raped me, but she had just sort of like surmised that it was possible that he might have wronged me in some way, and so she contacted me to find out because um, the police and the doctors who had examined her after the rape told her that, based on things that he'd said, it was likely that he was a repeat offender. So she was looking for other people. And it was just a very startling experience to get that phone call and hear her, I call her Eve in the essay, hear Eve talk about what she was going through, because I knew exactly where she was in her mind. She sounded the way that the inside of my brain had felt at the very beginning, like right after I had been raped. And I knew it just felt like a practical thing that I had really needed at the time, was good writing on how to think about what that feeling is, how long it's going to last, how to get out of it. I mean, I was suicidal for about 2 months afterwards, mostly because I was in so much pain and I just couldn't figure out how to get out of the pain. I needed it to end. And so I felt like if I could just give other people, I think of it like a ladder, but it's not really. It's like a rope that you can just like pull yourself along so that you don't have to stay there. It's possible to get out of that place. And that's really what this essay was. It was like I was trying to give very practical tools to people who were in a place that I had been and this woman had been. Um, and it's very, very difficult to find good writing on the subject, which is bizarre because there's so much writing on the subject. Um, and it's really a very difficult thing to find people to talk to about it because people are afraid of the word, and it's hard to find community. So that was how it came about. It was this decision to try to give her, I call it a guide for the tormented. I wanted to give her a kind of program, what I'd wish I'd had.
Mhm. Of course, you must imagine that the difficulty in which both you and I are encountering participating in this discussion or discussions like this. So I guess I'd like to know from your perspective, why is it so difficult to talk about rape?
It's so difficult for me to answer that question, um, considering it from the perspective of somebody who hasn't been raped. Because now that I've been raped, that experience was so formative for me that it's hard for me to see outside of it. It's just so much a part of me now. I can answer for me why it's hard to talk about and why it was difficult for me to talk about it for the first 2.5 years. And I really want to say I have spoken to a lot of women who have been raped now. The intensity of my feeling is something that I see a lot, though not always. I know women who have been raped who are like, this is not the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And so I don't want to pretend to speak for people unlike myself. And I also, if anyone's listening to this who has been raped and this has not been their experience and they find that isolating, I promise you, like, there are other people who have experienced some reaction to it that are like, that is more similar to yours. This is just mine. Right after it happened, it was very, very hard for me to say the word out loud. I mean, I think that I didn't say the word at all for like the first, so it happened very, very, very early in the morning, so really just very late the previous night, like 1:30 in the morning, and on a Friday night. The Saturday afterwards, the next day, I had a very good friend's birthday party that I had to go to. So I spent the entire most of that day in bed, which is very unlike me. I wake up at 6 every day of the week, and I run in the morning. So it was really it was bizarre for me to have that experience. That was like the first thing that it's very strange to have something happen to you that's not like an injury, like a physical injury that incapacitates you. You know, you kind of just keep telling yourself, like, why can't I just get over this? I really just want to be able to be a person, and I couldn't, and I could not get out of bed. So that was very weird. My first experience of not being in control of myself. And I forced myself to go out for drinks that night. And this was a very good friend of mine. And at the end of the night, when we were about to all go home, we were leaving the bar. And I said, Diana, something happened to me. Something just happened to me. And she said, well, what happened? And I like described it, but I couldn't say it. And she was trying to figure out what I meant, but it was hard to figure out what I meant when I couldn't use that word, but I couldn't say it. And she said, well, at least he didn't, go all the way. And I still couldn't say it. So I just looked at her and I said, he did. And then she was like, what? And then she wouldn't say it because she could tell that I was having trouble assigning it that status. So I think it's just, there's this tradition, which I think is useful, that we've inherited, which places so much weight on that word. It's such a bizarre, horrible thing to have to endure. And reckoning with the fact that that thing was done to you, and in my case by somebody I had trusted, which is often the case, was just so much for me to bear. It took a long time for me to get to a place where I could say that to myself. So I think that was part of it. It's, there are lots of crimes for which this is the case, and rape is certainly one of them. It's a very strange thing to have something so personal be a thing that people talk about so much. I mean, the subject of rape or the subject of sexual violence or harassment, all of this often placed on a continuum. It's a conversation that the relationship between men and women, men feeling entitled to women in a way that women don't feel entitled to one another or to men. This is like a thing that we're always talking about. It's a very in-your-face public thing. And that this specific manifestation of that dynamic ripped me open. I mean, it was so intensely personal. And so it took a very long time for me to be comfortable saying this thing that happened to me, which is this incredibly personal thing that changed me, that like pulled me out of myself and I had no access to myself for such a long time. That thing belongs in this broader, very public conversation. And I think that's why it took me such a long time to write about it. So I think that that's one reason. I really think that the part that I find difficult is that it becomes so important because it can hurt someone so much and mess them up and throw them out off track in such a deep way. So it's very hard to talk about it with precision, but very important to talk about it with precision. So maybe better not to talk about it at all than to talk about it wrong.
I'm sure this is I'm sure this is something that you've already know, but allow me to restate it. It was a disgusting, vile, evil thing that happened to you, and I'm
Thank you.
tremendously sorry that happened to you.
Thank you, Joel. It's very sweet of you.
Tell me about the 2 months after, in which you've said that you are at a very low point in your life.
Yeah, it's hard to describe it to someone who's never been seriously depressed. I guess that is what it felt like. I'm not saying, I have no idea whether or not you've ever experienced that, but to any of your listeners, it felt I burst into tears all the time. I work with two men who were, I should have said this earlier. I am so, so, so lucky to work with two men who were so supportive. Liberties paid for my therapy because I could not afford it for as long as I needed it. These poor guys, I burst into tears at the office so many times, and they were so kind and understanding. The worst day, and I write about this a little bit in the essay, the very worst day was my rapist and I had one mutual friend, and continues to be the case for me that I like hate hearing my rapist's name. I hate seeing it written. People keep asking me why I didn't like name him in the essay, and one of the reasons I didn't name him is because I'm very, very proud of that essay, and I don't want it to be like polluted by having his name in it. I just like the idea of typing his name is like grotesque to me. So I was very worried that this one friend of ours was going to say his name. And I didn't really need to worry about that in the rest of my life, but for him, I really did. So I told him about it, about the rape. And he told me to forgive my rapist. And that continues to be like one of the hardest conversations I've ever had. And it lives in my brain. I mean, for those 2 months, I was just constantly going over and over and over that conversation in my head, trying to figure out how somebody could have thought that that evil thing could be forgivable. So if somebody tells you that they've been raped, do not ask them to forgive their rapist. And there was one day when I woke up to a missed text and a missed phone call from the man who raped me, who I told him not to contact me. And he said that this friend of ours had told him to text me and say that he was sorry, because if he said that he was sorry, then I would forgive him. And I could not get up off the floor. I was in such a bad place. It was just terrible. I mean, I really didn't have the energy to like do myself physical harm because I like really could not move. But I really like don't know how I didn't. I don't know how I didn't kill myself in those days. It was terrible, terrible, terrible time. And at the end of that day, Liberties had an event with Maureen Dowd at Politics and Prose, like on Zoom. And Bill and Leon were like, they were very worried about me because they hadn't heard anything from me the whole day and they knew what had happened. So they were calling and I just couldn't I couldn't even answer. And finally, like they said, one of them got me on the phone. I think it was Bill. And he said, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this event. We could do it without you. Leon can do it. You do whatever you need. And the idea that I would be failing at my job, that would be like another victory that he had over me, was unbearable. So I did go, and you can watch it. I mean, I can't believe how functional I was. That was 2 weeks afterwards. And it was great. It was a good event. We were very proud because it was like really the beginning of the journal. It was a big deal for us. And afterwards we went out for drinks at a nearby hotel, and we went with my publisher Bill and his wife and Leon. And Bill and I went first, and we're sitting at the table before the other two people got there, and he looks at me, he goes, you don't have to stay here, you can go home, because I was like holding back tears. And so I just left, and I went back. I got my stuff from the office, and there was we're in a different building now, but the building we were in when this happened had this stone wall on the inside, and I slammed my head against that wall until I fell down. It was just, I just couldn't bear it. I couldn't be. I felt like something really evil, like the incarnation of evil had touched me. I felt like damaged goods. And that's how I felt for those 2 months. And at the end of those 2 months, a very, very, very good friend of mine who I actually met during this period, Julia Yaffe, had told me over and over again that I needed to get a therapist. And I said that I didn't trust anybody. Like, I didn't want to shop around my rape story and find a good therapist. Everybody should have a good therapist, but it's hard to find one. And it's really not fun to like look for one when you're in desperate need of one. So she told me that she had one, and she said, she's wonderful. I've worked with her and she knew other people who've worked with her. She's like, these are very smart women. She's done really good work for, you can trust her. And I did. Or if, Julia's protestations had just forced me to a place where like I knew that I needed this, but it really did help me enormously to just have somebody. And really all I needed this person to say to me was exactly what you just said, which is, what happened to you was really, really bad. Because there's this thing in your head telling you it wasn't that bad. I mean, in this instance, it was this mutual friend of mine telling me it was forgivable. And I needed the reassurance that like I wasn't crazy, that I really had been wronged in a very serious way.
I'm glad that helped. I guess for your information, I've never been raped, but I have been seriously depressed. So just add it in there. And
I'm sorry.
it's okay. I think I'm in a better place now. And I guess you mentioned the two coworkers. I'm guessing they are Bill Reichblum and Leon Witzeltier of Liberties.
Right.
Haven't met Bill, but he seems like a nice guy. And but I've
That's
met
great.
Leon, wonderful man. Say hi to him for me, of course. And I do appreciate the efforts that they've made in assuring your
And
well-being.
I just want to say about that, um, I am so lucky, and so many people are not lucky like that. So many people, I mean, I know people whose employers know that they had been raped. And anyway, I'm very, very, very lucky. I'm just gonna say that.
Now, I suppose, so my next question would be, so I wonder if So you mentioned that you were to do a Liberties event. So there was a pretty recent one. So it happened sometime between 2020 and this year. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It happened 2.5 years ago.
Do you remember who the first person that you told was? Or did you have to make a decision on who the first person you have to tell to?
Well, I didn't really have a choice because the first person I told was that the friend that I had to go to her birthday party. And so I told her that night. That was the first person I told. Yeah.
No, I believe it was towards the end of the essay, you said that you still have the inability to forgive this person. You must not forgive
Yeah.
him, I quote. You must respect yourself enough to know that this you cannot do. Anyone who asks you to forgive him is not worthy of your association, and yet you must not calcify into an uncharitable, withdrawn, fearful, and unforgiving person. Um, Obviously, I'm not going to ask you to forgive him, but I
Thank you.
guess do elaborate on the reasoning that led you to, I guess, withhold forgiveness to this human.
I can give you the specifics in his case. Um, I've wondered a lot. Look, this man who is a sick person, um, said that I'm he doesn't consider what he did rape. I assume. I don't know because I've never asked him, but this mutual friend of ours didn't. And that was part of what was so upsetting for me was like, well, why? Why wasn't it bad enough? I mean, I said no so many times. I told him to leave. Um, why didn't it count? And that happens to a lot of women. Every single woman I know who's been raped was told by her rapist that he didn't rape her. Um, except one who was very, very, very high at the time and said that he didn't remember. So I think first that the inverse of the evil that I experienced, I don't know what it would be like to be guilty of evil like that. I don't know how you would have to live with yourself. I don't know what lies you'd have to tell yourself. I really don't. And I imagine that it would be disfiguring. And it's certainly a subject worth considering. I I I don't know what I would do if I ever wronged a person in the way that he wronged me. I don't think that I would ask for forgiveness. I think that I would apologize. But I think part of the incredible magnitude of this crime is that forgiveness is something you really have to work for, and you don't get to ask for it. And you really have to prove repentance. I mean, I know people I respect a lot, people I love, who have committed horrible sins and who have spent their life apologizing. I mean, really, like, I know people who have spent every day for the past decade and a half apologizing for a wrong that they can never undo. And they know that they will never be forgiven for that wrong. And they did it to a person that they love. And they have they have a task I don't have, which is to figure out how to construct a relationship with themselves after recognizing the evil that they've committed. I have to say, I don't pretend to have an answer for that process. I do know that it doesn't look the way that his behavior does. It doesn't look like saying that he did it because he loves me, telling other people that I broke his heart. I mean, this is the kind of I think that if he contacted me now and said, and I've wondered about this, and he said, what I did was sick and I have spent every day for the past 2.5 years trying to figure out what kind of a person I must be to have done that. And I don't ask you to forgive me, but I want you to know that this is something that weighs very heavily on me. I swear I will never do it to anyone else. I am not the person I was before. I don't know if I would forgive him. I think I might respect him more than I do now. But forgiveness is a thing that you have to earn. So I think, there are stages of not forgivingness. There was definitely a period of anger that I don't feel anymore, and a period of fear that I don't feel anymore. I mean, I was afraid of him. I was afraid of going to parties in DC because I was afraid he'd be there. I was afraid of walking on streets that he might be on, walking past buildings he might be in. I mean, I'm afraid of reading his name. So there are stages, but I definitely feel safe saying whatever behavior would elicit forgiveness in me, he hasn't done it.
Perhaps perhaps another thing that can count as lucky to you is that this person does not work in the same environment as you do. So I suppose we can rule out Leon and Bill as a culprit, but I wonder if
Yes, he does work in the same sphere that I do.
yes, I understand. I know
He's
that
a
he's a writer. From reading your essay, I guess that he had a new book published and got some acclaim for
Yeah.
it. So I wonder if after the event, were there any sort of like occasions or events that you and him are in the same like space and you kind of have to interact in some way?
So right afterwards, there were a lot of events that I didn't go to because I thought that he might be there. I don't do that anymore. He doesn't live here anymore. He moved. He told people that he moved because I broke his heart. I don't know where he is. I think he's in New York, but I don't know where because I hate writing his name, so I hate reading his name, so I can't like Google him. I don't even like talking about him, so I don't ask friends who would know. But I've never had that experience. There was really shortly after the rape, I guess, not that shortly, about 3 months afterwards, had an event in Amsterdam. And Leon and I had an event in Amsterdam. We had a conference that Liberties is invited to annually, the Nexus conference. And we went to visit Spinoza's house. And have you been there? Have you
I
ever
would
been
love
there?
to be there. I haven't been to Amsterdam
You
nor
go.
Spencer's house. So.
It's a very cool experience.
Mhm.
Everyone should go. It's crazy. It's tiny. It's so strange that genius was in that house. But it's a very tiny space, and there's this attic which is really steep to get up to, and there are books and little displays, and then like in a side room in the attic, there's a poster with a bunch of faces of people who've spoken there recently, and he was there. My rapist was there. I don't know when he had been there because I don't like I would not have known. And I almost threw up. I mean, it was I was nauseous. Poor Leon was like had to like very steep to get up to that attic, and I like clambered down this like ladder like staircase and ran outside, and was kind of like dry heaving. So that was too much for me, and that was 3 months afterwards. I couldn't handle, just like I hadn't seen his face. And then on the way back from Amsterdam, I turned off my phone for the flight. When I turned it back on, I had a missed text from a friend who had screenshot a picture of him in a different friend's Instagram story to like tell on her for hanging out with him. and I lost it. I mean, I just like could not. It was like seeing his face twice in the space of 36 hours was too much for me. Um, yeah, so
Mhm.
not great. Not in person. I think I'd be okay now.
Mhm. Um,
I mean, I think that if I ever saw him in person now, I would tell him to leave. That's my plan. It's just to tell him to not be in the same room as me.
um, you said at the beginning of this essay that every rape survivor who has shared her story with you was told by her rapist that what he did to her was not rape. And as you've said, the same case applied to you. So I guess from your view, what explained this like discrepancy in perception?
What my therapist said was that they couldn't live with themselves if they thought that that's what it was.
Okay. Um, and I wonder if there there had there had to be a process in which your sense of self during and after the act was shattered, and you kind of have to rebuild a new sense of self afterwards. And I'm guessing you're still doing it now.
Yeah, that's right.
And um, there's so you've mentioned the phrase "my rapist" quite a few times here, and you've written somewhat in this piece. My rapist, I quote, what a heavy appellation. It, it binds you grotesquely. My rapist denotes a permanent relationship. This is one of the injustices for which I had been unprepared before my own experience. Mm, and and you mentioned that for most rapists, um, what what he did to you may not be the first time, may not be the first act of rape that he had committed. So
Yeah.
I wonder if you've done the same process as the woman that you've mentioned in the beginning of this talk, alias Eve, of reaching out to people who've been violated by him.
You mean to see if anybody else has been?
Yes.
I haven't. She and I really responded very differently. Um, she doesn't have a hard time seeing her rapist's name, and I really do. Um, so the only way that I would go about trying to find such people, I would have to like stalk him. I'd have to like look through his Instagram profile and his Twitter feed, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I'm yeah. So there really isn't any way for me to. And I would have to, I would have to get too close to him, and I can't handle it. I mean, I really can't. It's very, very difficult for me to accept that he is out in the world alive, living his life. Very hard for me. And it's not that I like want to kill him. I just wish he wasn't alive. Like, it's not like a violent thing. It's just like I don't feel in the beginning, I really didn't feel safe being in the world with him. Um, yeah. So it scares me that he might do it again. And I think that's what everybody who asks why I didn't report it says, aren't you worried that he's going to do it again? Um, yeah, I am, but I can't do it. I just can't.
You mentioned also in the essay that most women who have been raped, the rapist is someone they know. This applies to you as well. I guess if it's not too if it's not too reaching, I suppose. Tell me about what your relationship with this person before the act.
He was a very close friend. I trusted him. I knew that he felt more strongly for me than I felt for him. That was the constant subject of conversation. Yeah.
And I wonder that I wonder how do you recover from that in that this was someone you trusted and he has betrayed your trust in such a manner that it can never be recovered again. And I guess we've all been there, like someone we trust betrayed us, but I guess not in the manner that you and I are discussing. So
Definitely changed my relationship with men. Um, look, I'm in a relationship now. I've been in a relationship for a year, and definitely with a woman, I should say. And I'm very, very in love with her, and she takes very good care of me, and I trust her. So obviously I don't have sex with men anymore, but it definitely before her, it made me very distrusting of men. It made me very distrusting of casual sex. And I don't know how it changed me in terms of my capacity to trust. I felt in the beginning that it did. I felt very closed off. And I also felt I was really angry with myself. It really did change my perception of me because I didn't think I was the kind of person who wouldn't stand up for myself. You know, I was asleep. I had told him to leave over and over again. And he kept not leaving. And I should have yelled. I should have said, get the fuck out. But I didn't. I just thought, if I go to sleep, he'll leave. Because it was like he was a good friend. He knew at that time, I thought he cared about me. I mean, at one point, he even said to me, I was half asleep on the couch and he was, trying to initiate sex. And I had told him that I had told him before that day that I didn't want to. And I definitely told him that night. And he said, I want you so badly, but I care about you more than I want you. And I remembered that, like, while I was falling asleep, I was like, he cares about me. I couldn't get to the point where I would think he would do that, and that was a conversation that I had with myself a lot in the beginning. It was like, why didn't I yell? Why didn't I just scream at him? Why wasn't I impolite? Because that's what I was afraid of. I was afraid of like breaking the social code where a woman yells. And that's so often why women engage in sex they don't want to have, because a man puts her in a situation where she feels like she has to. I've had all kinds of sex that I didn't really want to have, but I was like, all right, fine, like whatever. But this, I had been very explicit. I had said no over and over again. And he just ignored me. And it didn't occur. I mean, like, I don't think even right before I fell asleep, I don't think I would have thought, if you'd asked me then, like, that if you were like, he's still here, he's not leaving. I couldn't like get to the place where it was like, well, what's he gonna do, right? Like, I'm sleeping. He's not gonna be able to do anything. And that trust is gone. That kind of trust is gone.
and I wonder if that, I guess, damages the way you build trust with other men, males. Well, of course, I'm asking this fully aware that I'm part of the human male species.
I mean, a lot of my close friends are men, and I do trust them. I think it helps that the person that I have to be vulnerable with the most is a woman, because it's still hard for me. Poor Lainey. She has to deal with all of my abnormalities. um, in all realms. But it's still difficult for me. I mean, it definitely affected my capacity for intimacy in any respect. And it does that, obviously. But in terms of male friendship, I wonder about this. I wonder, like, while I was writing the essay, I know women who hate men. I mean, who, like, not in a cute, oh my God, men suck kind of way, in like they in their marrow do not trust men. They believe that men are going to harm them. And I'm not like that. And I wonder sometimes, I like check on myself. I'm like, are you like that? How are we going in that direction? Um, and I'm not. I mean, as I write in the essay, I didn't extrapolate from his cruelty and wickedness that all men are analogously cruel and wicked. I really do think that he is uniquely bad. Um, but I feel a solidarity with women now that I didn't know how to feel before. And I don't feel that with men.
And does the experience of being raped, like again, you've alluded to earlier, change the way that you view sexual intimacy?
Yeah. You mean writ large or for me?
For you, and also at large, if you or would like to take on that.
It definitely has. I I want to feel safe in it in a way that I didn't know I needed before. And maybe I didn't need it before. And I don't think that other people naturally feel that way. I mean, they don't want to feel endangered, but I was reckless. Um, I was kind of wild. I still am in some ways, but I'm not a fearful person now. I'm much more closed off and much less convinced of my own power, my own impenetrability. I guess that's a bad word to use. But yeah, and that's I think that sex was a realm in which I felt um indomitable. And I think I still do in some ways, but I don't need to prove it anymore.
Mhm. Of course, but just to stay clear, you have nothing to blame for. It's not your fault.
Thank you.
But I'd like to ask, at what point did you, if you, whether you like blamed yourself for what happened, and at what point did you stop doing so?
Yeah. I did blame myself. Well, I don't know if I would put it that way. I think what I thought that there was something about me that invited this kind of behavior. I located the origin of the act in myself and not in him. Um, because it was difficult for me to say to myself, this person you trusted is evil. It's a really evil thing. It really is an evil thing to push yourself into a person who doesn't want it. And there are all kinds of ways that happens. But it's a sick thing, right? I mean, it's like just imagining it, it's so deeply wrong to do that. And the kind of entitlement that you have to feel you have a priori over other people is symptomatic of real evil. And I think I had a very hard time admitting it just felt so outlandish. It felt so crazy to say that I knew somebody that cruel. And it took a long time for me to get to a place where, I wanted to say I was the one that was wicked. wicked, because my wickedness, I can be in control of that. It's not something beyond my ken. Coming to terms with a wickedness that is like out there in the world that you have no control over, that's alive and breathing and, roaming the streets, that isn't you, is scary. And I've noticed this in conversations with other women who've been the victims of rape. It's really scary to have to admit to yourself that it's not you, it's him. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but believe me, it's true. You have to trust yourself to say a person you had trusted is evil. And that took me a long time. When did I really stop? I think it took 2 years. Yeah. I'm lucky. There are other people I know their whole lives they haven't stopped.
Yeah, and following up on that, I wonder what are some of the steps that you've done in order to, I suppose, say to yourself something in the lines of, "Oh, an evil thing has just happened to me, but I'm not willing to, I guess, be swallowed in the abyss, so to speak, to become a callous or, I suppose, an evil person."
I think it's part of it is that I was taken care of by really good people. And I'm very, very lucky to have family that loves me and friends that love me and really took care of me, and a professional environment that was not remotely cold, that was completely understanding. I mean, the day that I told Bill, I told Bill first, at work. I told him like the first thing when I got in Monday morning, and aside from saying he's so sorry, this is a person who could have done events with us. I mean, this is a person who could like conceivably have written for us. And he said immediately, we will never have anything to do with that person. And so just to have an environment of people who were all telling me, who all wanted me to succeed, who wanted me to be able to move past this, was enormously important for me. I wrote my book proposal that fall. I contacted my agent and told him that I was going to have a book proposal for him by the end of December. And I wrote it. I wrote it in like a month and a half. And that was a huge victory for me. That was really a decision to not stay on the mat. I think that I'm like that. And I'm really, really, really lucky that I have a hard time sitting still. I think that it is like a kind of mania kicks in when I'm too far down. But some of it is spirit, but a lot of it is support.
No, I'm not a woman, of course. But I understand that for a woman, the two facts that are true, well, not all men are rapists, but virtually all rapists are men, can be hard to reconcile. Now, of course, there are certain statistics, 1 in 3, 1 in 4, 1 in 6, of women who will be raped in her adulthood can be paranoid inducing.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful temptation, I suppose, to identify yourself as either rape victim or rape survivor in, above all else. Of course, we've known each other for some time. I've sort of identified you with the label of a woman, friend, great writer, one who really got me into Isabel Bear. But I guess the label of rape victim slash survivor will be part of that. But I try not to let that be the first thing when I think of you, Celeste Marcus. I suppose my question now is twofold. How do you stop yourself from being paranoid over this fact, like paralyzed by paranoia? And two, how do you stop yourself from identifying like yourself as a rape victim slash survivor above all else?
Well, I'm lucky that I care about the things I care about a lot. So I write about three subjects. I write about Israel, art, and women. And all of those things are the things that I think about the most, that I want to be an authority in. Those are the things that I want to have a kind of proficiency. I want to achieve a level of authority in those subjects, which is a pretty tall order. Those are big subjects. And I think, it's not a struggle for me. I don't have a hard time saying I'm a rape survivor. Like, I don't have a hard time saying I'm a Zionist. Being a survivor of rape is something that I worked hard for. I've thought a lot about it. I take my identities very seriously, and I want to develop a sophisticated relationship with all of them. And that requires a lot of work. And I work hard on all of them. So maybe this would be more difficult for me if I wasn't. I mean, it certainly was more difficult for me right afterwards, because it was horrible not being able to paint, not being able to read, not being able to write. Although I never missed an essay. I'm very proud of that. And I got my book, I got my book deal. But so I didn't let myself lose myself for too long. But I think that I'm lucky in that I have these kinds of monomaniacal passions. They're not monomaniacal since there are three of them, but I have obsessive tendencies, and that's a lucky thing for me. So I don't get swallowed up by any one of them because I get distracted by the other one. I wrote this essay on rape. I was writing this essay on rape over October, and which was October 7th. Like, that's when I was writing it. I mean, I was taking breaks from reading the news to write this essay. It was not a fun time. And I was very aware of going from two subjects that were affecting me very intensely, horribly. I mean, if I wasn't sleeping for one, I wasn't sleeping for the other. I mean, it was really a terrible time. And I think that was never a concern of mine. I was never really, or at least it hasn't been for so long that I don't remember ever being concerned about that. About the paranoia, this is the thing that I fall into sometimes, and I'm working on it. If I spend, an hour on the phone with Eve, talking to her about what she's going through and what she had gone through, and then I go for a run, every man on that run looks like a rapist to me. And I have to tell myself that's not right. But it's hard. It's a difficult thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way that I deal with it is most primarily it's that I don't want to trivialize what he did by telling myself that so many other people could have done it.
Since you mentioned the 7th of October, I believe our last conversation took place before that, and of course this one took place after. Now, of course, it should not escape mentioning that Israeli women were raped by Hamas. Some were killed by them, and some are still being held hostage by them. Now, one of the things I actually find rather admirable about you is that, and this is something that I try to live up to, is now after October 7th, there are a lot of like these intellectual slash political takes, so to speak, that goes on either to rigorously defend Israel, the nation state, or try to quote unquote excuse what Hamas did. occupation this, settler colonialist that. I'm sure you've seen like your fair share of them. What is missing in the discourse is the gravity of the horror that was inflicted upon the real humans, um, Israelis first, and of course, the Gazans who are bearing the blunt of Israel, the nation states' might. And from purveying your social media feed, you've focused intensely on that. I think that's wonderful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Now, I wonder if there a personal connection was made from you at least to um, the women and girls who were victimized during this war.
Um, I didn't need a personal connection to be made. Every Jew in Israel, every victim who suffers because because they were in the Jewish state, my connection to them is already so deep. It was really as a Jew first and a woman second, which is interesting. I think that the discourse since then has been a little more complicated. I mean, I think that my response has been more nuanced because of my experience. It's been hard for me to see the different sides talk about rape in a way that's using it in a, I find, a disgusting way. Kind of like, the Israeli side is saying, look how bad this is. This is nothing like, this doesn't hold, what's happening in Gaza doesn't hold a candle to this. And it's like, I wouldn't want rape to be used as an excuse to inflict brutality on a civilian population. And the other side also, like, I don't even want to repeat it. I mean, first of all, just saying it didn't happen, which is obviously triggering, if you'll pardon the expression. So I think that seeing the way that these women, even in their rape, weren't treated as human. They get reduced to justifications for or renunciations of the things that the men have done in their name. That was difficult for me. But that day, I loved them as a Jew. I loved them. It was part of a Jewish tradition of torture and degradation and debasement that I felt as a Jew. I mean, I feel that in my bones. And that's how I read it. That's how I read these things. I mean, I was reading all of it. I was everything I could find about the rapes, about the sexual torture. I guess maybe that is how it was manifesting, was just my obsessive need to just read all of it. I didn't experience that as doing it as a woman. I really did feel like I was witnessing one of the greatest catastrophes of Jewish history, and it was happening in my lifetime. I'm a student of Jewish history. I've read about these things happening to my people, but it had never happened this way in my lifetime. And I think that was why I was responding the way that I was.
Well, I would
Thank
ask,
you for that question.
yeah, you're welcome. I would ask Saul Bellow to end us on to end this discussion, if I may. I'm reading this work, To Jerusalem and Back, his small volume on it's a trip to Israel after the 73 war. Quote, in the domestic ceremony of past dishes and filled glasses, thoughts of a destructive enemy are hard to grasp. What you do know is that there's one fact of Jewish life unchanged by the creation of a Jewish state. You cannot take your right to live for granted. Others can, you cannot. This is not to say that everyone else is living pleasantly and well under a decent regime. No, it means only that the Jews, because they are Jews, have never been able to take the right to live as a natural right. And that's kind of haunted me ever since. And it's a testament to the wonders of writing, isn't it? Like even years after this is written and the authors pass on, it still has that power. And I think that your essay 50 years from now, hopefully people still read it then, will carry the same power. So I guess I'll let you have the last word, whether you might like to talk about either Israel or being a woman suffering from rape.
I just want to say one thing, which is that what you said to me when you said this shouldn't have to be said, but I'm going to say anyway, what was done to you was vile and evil. And I'm so sorry that this happened to you. If somebody tells you they were raped, that is what you should say. And that's all you should say. If they want to talk about it more, great. But Chuang, thank you so much for having that response. Thank you for this whole conversation. I'm really very grateful to you for it.
Likewise, thank you for being on this program.